Your body of work showcases a remarkable ability to balance layered storytelling with moments of stripped down simplicity where character or plot elements are subtly woven in, allowing the audience to discover details in real time. I'm curious, do you feel more at home working with one of those approaches, letting things breathe versus taking our breath away, or is it more about story itself where your creativity thrives regardless of the method?
Well, what's interesting about Fuse is that Fuse happens almost in real time, the majority of it, and there's very little room for character development beyond what's there within the action. So it was quite an interesting challenge to try and build up character and build up the details of the character, but without sort of pausing to do so. You want to keep the
Mhm.
energy going, it's one of the things I feel kind of more proud about in the film is that there is that you actually do get to know these characters quite well
Yeah.
and details about their lives, but it's always in a very very organic manner, and it keeps the story moving, and you don't stop to have a kind of a contemplation scene or a chat between friends. That it's always within the action.
Mhm.
I think this film more than any of the others that I've done it is like that. In most of the other scenes I've in Hell or High Water, the brothers have a chat, looking out over the ranch or whatever. There's time for the for the characters to have their own moments on their own moments together, whereas in this film it's like it's fairly consistently moving, and that was an
Yeah.
interesting challenge, and one I really liked. I mean, I love those films that don't give too much away about that. You don't bother with the kind of the deep psychology, and you get to know the characters in real time. And I think there's something stronger about that. And I think weirdly, quite a lot of contemporary cinema sort of doesn't do that. It likes to have these moments where it pauses and you get to know them. Um, and I love the kind of hard-boiled movies where you don't do that.
Yeah, yeah. You're balancing different perspectives, like hopping from one moment of intensity to another. It's like dropping dominoes from like multiple directions or like lining them all up and trying to figure out which one is actually going to knock that final piece down. And it like just when you think it's like this is the lane, it's picking up speed, another one picks up speed. So I'm curious about diving a little more into that energy in your process about working that process out to tap into that rhythm and figure out the proper mathematics or grammar involved and be able to pull something like this off, or working with others to pull some of that off.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I mean, the game from the start was a game of tension. That was how I can conceive the film. When I first had the idea, like 15 years ago. That it was all about the tension between, the unexploded bomb thing and the heist movie thing and the kind of
Mhm.
mashup of that. But in the making of it, you're trying to get tension out of each scenes in terms of the interaction of the characters, in terms of the interaction of the characters with jeopardy, like a bomb, ticking and all those kind of things. And so you're building that in there, and I have a very organic way of working with actors. I like to kind of create the whole world and then let them play within it, and
Mhm.
find stuff along the way, stuff that we hadn't thought about, before. And because basically when you're in that situation, it's all together. You're in your costume. There's so many more things that come at you that weren't on the page. So I encourage everyone to be tuned into that and to be opportunistic with that. So we've always got this sort of slightly live feeling to what we're doing when the cameras are rolling, which I think creates some of the sort of sense of authenticity. And then of course we're structuring it. And there's visual language as well. The camera, the camera in this film is probably more kinetic than any other one I've done. It's like I've really tried to
Mhm.
keep it moving the whole time. And then there's a construction of it editorially where you know that you've got these three strands that are running, and they're all going towards a point. Editorially we're trying to kind of keep every edit kind of jumpy and slightly unexpected, and create a sort of sense of tension with that, and pull that all together so that the energy is there and everything. And because when you have multiple strands, you don't want to leave one and let the tension sag. You want to leave one and let
Right.
the tension build and build, and build it up. So that was a game. A lot of, I worked with the same composer, Tony Dugan, on the last four films, and that he's been not the last four. Howard was number four, but on four films, and the stuff we do with the music is always kind of really interesting with that. In this case, I had this idea when I was shooting that I wanted to do something all in the same tempo, all in the same key. So the whole soundtrack is all at 120 beats a minute.
Mm.
You see, and then within that, so it's kind of like boom. There's repetition in there, but there's a lot of variation in there. But that helps you ramp up the tension, and that So it's sort of it's an accumulation, but starting with the scenes themselves, and then obviously the manufacture of it editorially.
Yeah, right, right. Th This may be tricky to answer, but can you talk about the poetic resonance of ending this film, much like Hell or High Water, with gunfire echoing off the rocks?
Well, it was an idea that because of the fact that there is no room for backstory, and
Hmm.
you don't really want to do anything like that will connect things that you don't want to connect because you're trying to tell a story. It was an interesting idea to somehow put the backstory in at the end, as it were. But one thing that was really important to me was that it was a scene of high tension rather than a scene of resolution. Um,
Right.
and so that it was like you've almost resolved one element of the film, and then you suddenly get back into a very very high stake kind of tension uh, um, meeting effectively. Somebody described it as a meet cute, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
quite funny. But that was kind of that, and that's structurally an interesting game. I don't think I know of any other film that sort of played that game before. So there was something
Yeah.
interesting about that.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of poetry, I wanted to touch on the symbolism of the fox.
Ah,
It's often associated with themes like adaptability and cunning, and I'm sure its inclusion was intentional, kind of serving as to complement the story's broader themes. So was that your idea, or has that been your writer?
no, that was my idea. And it was my idea. All those metaphors aside, which are there, I just felt that it was interesting to. You're looking at ways of trying to express what happens to a busy city when it's evacuated, or when an area is evacuated, and I just thought it would be really interesting to show that through the animal that's you can't evacuate a fox, and I just it was fun to have Theo having an encounter with it, so it connected one part of the story with the others, and and the police are closer than they think they are, but they don't know what it is.